4 things that kill your value in front of a man. Before we get into this message, I want you to pause everything else around you, because what you're about to hear isn't just another talk, it's a wake-up call, a mirror, a moment of truth. This is for the woman who's ever felt like she had to shrink to be loved, apologize to be accepted, cheat to be chosen, or change just to be seen. If you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered where you went in the process of trying to keep someone who didn't value you, this is for you. We're going deep into the silent habits that quietly kill your worth in front of a man, and even more importantly, how to reclaim it. So don't just watch, lean in, because by the end of this, you won't just be reminded of your value, you'll know exactly how to protect it. Over-apologizing and people-pleasing may seem like small habits, but they quietly dismantle your value, especially in front of a man who's watching not just your words, but your standards. When you apologize for things you didn't do or rush to say sorry just to keep peace, what you're really doing is giving away your power in exchange for approval. And that approval is often short-lived and rooted in fear, not respect. A woman who constantly seeks to avoid conflict, to make everything okay, even at her own expense, begins to train people around her that her comfort, her needs, her voice, they're all secondary. The more you over-apologize, the more you suggest, without even realizing it, that you're a problem to be managed rather than a presence to be valued. You're not too emotional, you're just honest. But when you diminish yourself to keep a man comfortable, you're slowly shrinking into a version of you that, and here's the hard truth, many times, that man will begin to respond to that smaller version, not because he's cruel, but because he believes that's who you are. He'll test your limits, not with words, but with actions. How he cancels plans last minute, how he dismisses your concerns, how he jokes about your standards like they're flexible. And when you laugh it off, say sorry for overreacting or try to fix the mood, again, you teach him that your feelings can be bent for the sake of harmony. But harmony built on your silence is not peace. It's pressure. And pressure builds resentment, not just towards him, but within you. People-pleasing, while it looks like kindness, is often fear in disguise. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. So you say yes when you mean no, you overextend, you play small, thinking it will keep the relationship alive. But real connection doesn't grow in the soil of self-abandonment. It dies there. Because a man can't fully respect a woman who doesn't respect herself. And deep down, even you start to feel disconnected, not from him, but from your own center. You wonder why you feel exhausted, invisible, anxious. It's because you're trying to earn your place instead of claiming it. When you lead with apology instead of authenticity, you invite imbalance. You teach him that your presence requires permission. And once that seed is planted, it's hard to uproot, because you'll notice over time, it becomes easier for him to ignore your needs, delay commitment, or take your loyalty for granted. And why wouldn't he? You've shown him that you'll bend, break, or beg just to be seen. But you weren't created to beg for a place in anyone's life. You were created to be a blessing, not a burden. And the first step to being valued is knowing you never had to apologize for existing in the first place. Ignoring red flags is one of the most dangerous ways you lower your value in front of a man, not because he always consciously uses it against you, but because subconsciously he learns how much you're willing to tolerate. When you overlook the signs, the inconsistent communication, the subtle dismissals, the lack of follow-through, you're not just giving him grace, you're giving away the boundaries that protect your peace and define your worth. And let's be honest, sometimes you don't ignore red flags because you don't see them. You ignore them because you don't want them to be true. You're hoping love can change a pattern, that patience can turn silence into consistency, that understanding can turn disregard into respect. But red flags don't change colors. They stay red, and they get louder The longer you ignore them, the more damage they do, not just to the relationship, but to your self-trust. A woman who overlooks red flags slowly teaches herself to normalize dysfunction. She starts explaining away the unacceptable. She tells herself he's just stressed or tired or not ready. And the more she does that, the more she becomes emotionally invested in a version of him that doesn't exist, the version that could be, the version she's trying to build him into. But love doesn't require building someone from the ground up. That's construction, not connection. And when you're in construction mode, you become more focused on fixing him than fulfilling you. You start pouring energy into a future that hasn't even been promised, while your present is starving for attention, for clarity, for honesty. Men notice what you let slide. They may not say it, but they see it. When he speaks to you harshly and you stay, when he ghosts you for days and you welcome him back without accountability, when he flirts with disrespect and you respond with softness, hoping he'll see your worth, what he sees instead is that you are afraid to walk away, afraid to be alone, afraid to choose yourself, and fear never commands respect. It only breeds manipulation or neglect. The man who could have respected you will now test you. The man who never respected you will now use you. And all because the first time he showed you a red flag, you treated it like a pink one. When you ignore red flags, you disconnect from your power. You start to believe that being chosen is more important than being respected. That having a man, even a half-present one, is better than having no one. But presence without partnership is emptiness. You deserve more than almost. You deserve someone who doesn't make you question what you already know deep down. That gut feeling you keep silencing, that's your spirit speaking. That tension in your chest, that's your body reminding you that your peace is more important than his potential. When you stop ignoring red flags, you stop abandoning yourself. And when you stop abandoning yourself, you start becoming a woman whose value is no longer negotiable. Lack of boundaries is one of the silent destroyers of your value, especially in relationships where you're trying to be seen, loved, or chosen. When you operate without boundaries, you give unrestricted access to people who haven't earned the right to be that close. You allow behavior that chips away at your self-respect, all in the name of keeping the connection alive. But what you're actually doing is teaching someone that your comfort, your time, and even your identity are all up for negotiation. And the moment you start compromising your standards to accommodate someone else's inconsistency, you begin to disappear in your own story. You stop being the main character and start becoming a background role in a relationship that only benefits the other person. Without boundaries, you say yes when you really mean no. You overextend yourself emotionally, mentally, and physically, hoping that your sacrifices will eventually be recognized, hoping he'll see how loyal, how kind, how ride or die you are. But the truth is, people rarely value what is freely given without a line. Love without boundaries quickly becomes obligation. It shifts from mutual respect to silent resentment. You start doing things not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. Because saying no might make him lose interest, pull away, or label you as difficult. So you accept half effort and call it love. You accept late night text and last minute plans and convince yourself it's just his way. But your spirit knows better. Your heart knows it's starving while you keep feeding someone else. When you don't set boundaries, you leave the door open for your value to be defined by how much you can endure instead of how much you require. A man who sees you allow repeated disrespect, crossed lines, or emotional neglect will begin to associate you with tolerance, not strength. And it won't be intentional at first, but over time, he'll stop trying because why would he give his best when you've accepted his bare minimum? Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are gates that decide who gets in, how far they can go, and what the terms of access are. Without them, your life becomes open terrain for emotional chaos. You might think keeping boundaries makes you look cold, distant, or unloving, but in reality, they do the opposite. They show that you honor yourself, that you are aware of your needs, and that your peace is non-negotiable. And a man who is serious about you will never be offended by your boundaries. He'll be grateful for them because your boundaries make him feel safe too. They show him that you're not desperate, you're deliberate, that you're not trying to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that kind of woman, she's not just respected, she's remembered. She becomes the standard, not the exception. Desperation and clinginess are often misunderstood because they're rooted in something real, the desire to love and be loved. But when that desire turns into neediness, it begins to erode your value in the eyes of a man. There's a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally dependent. The moment you feel like you can't function without his validation, his attention, his response, or his presence, you've given him emotional power that belongs to you. Desperation doesn't announce itself with loud words. It shows up in how quickly you respond to a message, even when he left you waiting, and how often you initiate conversations just to keep things going, and how much anxiety you feel when he pulls away even slightly. That energy becomes heavy, not attractive. It doesn't pull a man closer, it quietly pushes him away, because what he begins to feel isn't connection, it's pressure. Men are wired to respect what stands strong, not what clings out of fear. When you constantly seek reassurance or overgive just to stay in his good graces, you make it clear that you're afraid of being left. And fear-driven energy doesn't command love, it begs for it. The truth is, the more you show that you need him to feel whole, the more he'll subconsciously question your ability to stand on your own. It's not about pretending to be distant or emotionless. It's about knowing that you are already enough, whether he shows up or not. When you operate from a place of fullness instead of emptiness, you stop attracting men who feed off your insecurities and start drawing in men who respect your strength. Clinginess isn't just about physical attachment. It's the emotional grasping that says, please don't leave because I don't know who I am without you. And that mindset is dangerous because it makes you settle. You settle for half effort, for inconsistent love, for broken promises, just because the fear of being alone feels heavier than the reality of being mistreated. But the moment you choose yourself fully, the moment you stop begging for time, for attention, for commitment, you reclaim the power that desperation took from you. You show that you're not here to convince anyone to stay. You're here to walk in truth, and whoever is aligned with that truth will stay without needing to be chased. The most magnetic energy you can have is peace. Not loud, not flashy, not needy, just peace. A peace that says, I know what I bring, and I refuse to beg for what's already mine. A man may be drawn to beauty, but he stays for stability, and desperation makes everything unstable. So if you feel yourself becoming clingy or anxious in someone's presence, pause and ask yourself, am I connected to him or just afraid of losing him? Because there's a big difference, and your answer will show you exactly where you need to grow. When you trust your own worth, you won't chase, you won't cling, and you won't beg. You'll simply attract what's meant for you without losing yourself in the process. Forgetting who you are is one of the most subtle yet destructive things that can happen when you're trying to be loved by a man. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small compromises, in silenced opinions, in choices you make just to keep the peace or stay close to someone who doesn't truly see you. At first, it feels like adjustment. You tell yourself you're just being understanding, being flexible, being supportive, but slowly you stop recognizing the woman in the mirror. Your laughter becomes quieter. Your dreams feel further away. Your voice becomes a whisper you barely hear anymore. And you wonder how you got here. So deep into a relationship or the idea of one that you've become a version of yourself designed for someone else's comfort. A man may initially be drawn to your individuality, your strength, your confidence, your energy, But the moment you begin to mold yourself to fit what you think he wants, you lose the very thing that made you stand out. When you start saying yes to things that go against your values or dimming your light so he can shine brighter, you're not building a connection, you're building a mask. And that mask becomes harder and harder to take off. The more you ignore your own needs and desires, the more you teach yourself that love must come at the cost of authenticity. But real love never requires you to erase yourself. Real connection doesn't ask you to shrink. It calls you to rise, to grow, to expand. When you forget who you are, you become emotionally dependent on his validation to feel secure. You wait for his text to feel valuable. You adjust your appearance, your behavior, even your boundaries to avoid upsetting him. And in doing so, you place your identity in someone else's hands, hoping they'll carry it gently. When in reality, most people won't even realize they're holding something sacred. You begin to internalize their moods, their distance, their choices as a reflection of your worth. But their inability to love you well is not proof that you're unworthy. It's proof that you've stopped loving yourself well enough to walk away. Every time you abandon a part of yourself to hold on to someone else, you send the message to your soul that she doesn't matter. And eventually your spirit will start to rebel. You'll feel restless, bitter, anxious, and out of place. Not because something's wrong with you, but because the real you is buried underneath the version you've been pretending to be. The woman who once knew her worth, her power, her voice is still in there. He's just waiting for you to come back home. Because when you remember who you are, when you stand in the truth of your identity, your calling, your beauty, you stop needing to be chosen and you start choosing yourself. And that shift changes everything. It changes how you walk, how you speak, who you entertain, and most importantly, who you no longer allow access to the sacred space of your life. If there's one truth you take from this message, let it be this. Your value was never meant to be proven. It was meant to be protected. Every time you over-apologize, ignore what you know deep down, abandon your boundaries, chase after attention, or forget who you are just to be loved, you silently trade your worth for a moment of acceptance. But true confidence, the kind that builds lasting respect, comes from knowing that love should never cost you you. You don't need to shrink to be seen or bend to be kept. The right man won't require you to lose yourself to earn a place in his life. He'll honor the woman who knows her power, speaks her truth, and stays rooted in who she is no matter who walks in or out of the room. So step back into your identity, reclaim your voice, set your boundaries, guard your peace, and never again apologize for demanding the kind of love that doesn't ask you to sacrifice your soul. Good luck on your journey toward wholeness, healing, and high standards. You are not too much. You are not too strong. You are just enough for the life and love you were created for. Thank you for listening, growing, and showing up for yourself. May your confidence rise, your peace deepen, and your worth never be forgotten again. You've got this, and you are so worth it.